Let's take a look at part 2 of your DGD 120 finals. So before we start, so overall I think these are pretty well done. This one is tricky on purpose. I did this for a long time, working with some newspapers way back, where clients give you, the old 10 pounds of garbage you got to fit into a 5-pound bag kind of thing. So this is supposed to be sort of awkward and clunky on purpose. It's to sort of help you sort of deal with those pieces that are not ideal and make them look ideal. Yeah, I did this for way too many years. Anyway, so I think here we have a really good start. I think you could organize a little bit, make it a little bit cleaner. I like your headline you have, and then the 10th annual site night, and then you have your sort of subhead, and then info and contact info. I think some minor things, these are all just suggestions. So I think sort of some minor things, we can make this a little bit smaller. You can make it, I don't know how big it is now, but you can make it like 10 point and then put it down in the bottom corner. It doesn't necessarily have to be part of the design. Copyright info is really just kind of there to be legal. A sort of side story about that was like a lot of car, if you look at car ads and things like that, the fine print, they call it that for a reason. Usually the legal stuff is as small as you can legally make it and as out of the way as you typically can. So I think that'll free up a little space if you had it like down in the bottom left, and then that could free up some space to make this logo or this element be a little bit bigger and sort of fill the space a little bit more. And I think you can kind of even these out a little bit and be careful because I think you're distorting that LensCrafters logo. You can play around with the sizing. Maybe make this Lions logo a touch smaller, spread them out a little bit, and then that might give you room to, if you spread them out slightly, that would free up a little bit of space so they're not so crowded, but also make them appear a little bit more evenly. And then sort of lastly, I would just watch your spacing. Your spacing is kind of, I wouldn't say all over the place, but you have, this is center justified, this is center justified, and this is left justified. It makes it a little bit sort of off. So you kind of have, a little side-to-side motion going. I would work on making it a little bit cleaner. You can adjust this a little bit, or even make this a little bit bigger, and have it a little bit more styled within this space. Maybe even make this a tiny bit smaller, and then that'll free up, to have, if you wanted, this contact info to be a little bit bigger, a little bit bolder, center justified, and then have this be, because that's sort of more important. This is somewhat less important. You have your sub headlines you can kind of play with a little bit to sort of even up that space. Play with your sizing, even using the same font. If you had, a couple of different sizes, that can offer a lot of design options for something like this. Let's back out just a tiny bit. So I think here, the idea isn't too bad. Again, I'd watch what you're copying as well. You don't need this minimum 10 point. This is informational text for the assignment. You just need this line here. Again, you can sort of tuck that at the bottom right or left corner. You want to make sure that you're definitely distorting this logo. You want to make sure that you're not distorting logos. I think they're all but this one is. Your headline is decent, and then you have this kind of huge block of text here, which is a bit problematic. I would potentially even have, the trick or treat for a cause at the top, and then if you wanted it's the 10th annual site night as a subhead, and then you can kind of break up this text a little bit, and not to copy your classmates, but take a look at what some of the classmates are doing, and also what I'm talking about with my critiques with other class members, to sort of give you ideas of how to break up text, how to stress what's more important information, how to sort of scale back with what is potentially less important. But I would definitely make this a bit bigger, fit a space on your design a little bit more, where these logos are, the sponsor logos, definitely need to be similar in area that they take up, and you want to have them be a little bit more organized. Things like that. They're kind of just like plopped at the bottom of your design here. So organizing your information a little bit more, organizing your logos a bit, and then arranging them so that it's a little bit more visually appealing, and also making sure that you're either scaling with your scale tool or you're holding shift when you scale your logos. Whenever I'm working with logos or something like that I know I definitely don't want to distort, that's where that scale tool comes in really handy, because you can do it by percentage and it'll make sure that it keeps your proportions intact. All right. So again, I think we have a good start here. We have some similar problematic things with this one. I think having the headline here and then having the main design element here works pretty well. Organizing your block of text here. I think your logos are massive for this particular design. You could definitely scale them back a little bit, give them a little room to breathe. That'll kind of help you keep them sort of the same visual. Again, they're all three completely different shapes. That's sort of the idea is a lot of times with ads like this, you get a few different sponsors and you got to fit all their logos in. You got to make them appear like they're all the same size, because usually they're all paying the same amount of money. So they want, why is his logo way bigger than my logo? Things like that. So that would free up the. Oops, I'm zooming like crazy. Definitely work on making these a little bit smaller, giving them a little bit more space to breathe. And then again, sort of organizing the text for sure. So it's a little bit more readable, less than like one giant block. Again, sort of like decide on how you want to break that up. What you want to emphasize, what you want to kind of have pushed back into the background. But I think overall, a really good start. Oops, that's good. So we can kind of see the edge. This one is a really good example, a really good start of what I'm talking about as far as like emphasizing. I think this one could be a little bit pushed a little bit more, even more so than it is. I think it's a really good start. Again, the headline at the top, nice font choice, works really well. The 10th annual site night as a subhead in bold, and then you have sort of this information, pushed back a little bit just because it's more. It's less bold, but it's more of a normal font. And then I like even having here the simple bold versus plain. You kind of read it as, if you just look at it really quick, you see freesitenight.org. So those kind of like emphasis points there work really well. I would even push this a little bit more. You can have this be a little bit bigger, or play around with. You can be a little bit more dynamic with maybe even text on a path at the top here. But you can play with your sizing a little bit. Oops, as I'm zooming. Even make this a little bit smaller, just in size. Have this block be a little bit smaller, maybe even full justify it. And then have these. It'll give you a little bit more room to play around with, making that maybe a little bit bigger. Definitely make the logos slightly bigger, a little bit more even, and then I think you can spread them out. If you want to use this space, I think you could definitely make them a little bit more even in this space, and then you could, again, going back to tucking this either left or right, but that might give you a little bit of room, maybe even center this, if you wanted to keep it same size, center it within this space so you don't have this kind of like awkward empty space at the bottom there. But yeah, I think a really good start, and I think a really good example of that, simple, bold versus regular to highlight important information works really well here. It's a very strong example of exactly what I was talking about there, where you get the order of importance by visual order. All right. I think this is a decent start. I think there's going to need to be some revamping. A little bit more reorganization, if that's a word, it is now. So your headline works really well, and make sure watch your edges. Make sure that you're not coming too close to the edge there of your size. But I think the font works really well. Again, you don't have to have these. Everybody doesn't have. You don't have to have these on one line. You could even have trick or treat for a cause on site night, things like that. You could break up that headline. To give yourselves a little bit more room for designing. I don't mind the idea of having that site night in the middle. As you're finding out, it does sort of make it awkward for evening out the space. So sort of a left or a right. Justification is not the right word, but having it on the left or the right sort of works a little bit better. It gives you a little bit more room to organize a text. As you can see here, it's a little bit, it's hard to work with sort of like two columns rather than one, larger area to work with. I can see there's, some visual hierarchy, which is nice. You have the headline and some more important information here. You can see like your information is kind of getting a little bit lost because you have these big chunks of text. You might have a little too many fonts going on. I might, for information, something like this, or where was the scare up used eyeglasses, like that. If you style it a little bit more, for headlines or subheadlines, like I think a more playful font works a little bit better. But for more information, like this block here, this block here, you can see that it's a little bit difficult to read when you get into more of a display font. So when you have information or important information that you want to get across, you want to make sure that you're using a little bit of a cleaner font, a font that's a little bit more easy to read. As you can see, as we zoom out, like it's almost impossible to read. So those are the kind of things you want to consider when you're making font choices. But I think overall, a decent start. Some shifting and some organizing, I think, could work well. Oops. There we go. Just lagged. So this one, as we can see, we need quite a bit of work. A decent start. But again, going back to some of the things that I had said about some of the earlier pieces, organizing information, having a visual hierarchy with headline, subheadline, informational text, things that you want to stress, etc. Definitely reorganizing the logos. I know it's primarily a LensCrafters thing, but the LensCrafters logo is huge. Your information within the ad is just a little bit kind of placed in a little bit clunky, a little bit. Why am I blanking? I'm trying to think of a word and it's not coming. But it's a little bit clunky. It's kind of plopped in there. Really, you want to make sure visually that readers know, that there's an intent for why you did something. Especially with design, like that's one of the things that differentiates design. Is design has a specific intent. Whether it's to provide information, again with the visual information, a visual hierarchy with important information, the who, what, when, why, where, that kind of stuff. Think of the old invitation kind of stuff. What's the important information and what's the icing on the cake kind of thing. So I think a lot can be learned from some of the things that I've said with some of our previous examples for this one. But definitely pay attention to visual hierarchy with logos and information. In order of importance and visual importance. It doesn't specifically mean like a list order, but visually, you can create a reading order by driving the viewer's eyes to different portions of your pieces by designing, bold versus plain fonts, sizes, bigger fonts versus smaller fonts. These are things that emphasize a visual hierarchy or visual reading order.